Good evening. Why I love Pineapple Express. We're all just walking collections of stories, I think. When you tell one to another person, it's like holding out a little wire, hoping they can connect it to one of their own. A little contact, a spark. That's why it's so uncomfortable to haul around a story you can't share. It just sort of flops about inside you, useless. You can try to offer it up, but all you'll reap is blank stares if you're lucky, ridicule or pity, or awkward throat clearing noises if you're not. Here's a story I don't tell many people. One afternoon, I was taken from an emergency room to the psych unit of a different hospital in the back of a police car. The officer was a nice woman who apologized for the long wait before she could come collect me, then didn't speak to me again. This was my first ever ride in a police car, and for the record, so far it's been the last. I knew from movies that they don't have door handles in the back. I didn't know that the entire seat is made of smooth, hard plastic, like something you would carry a baby around in. There was a plexiglass barrier down the middle, separating me from the other passenger, a teenage boy with long black hair in a ponytail. We didn't attempt any small talk. The windows were tinted. I appreciated the privacy as we glided down the highway. The psych unit was divided into two wings, one for high-risk patients and one for low-risk. The high-risk wing was behind a door with a little barred window. Some patients liked to stand behind it for a few minutes at a time, just watching the low-riskers going about their apparently safer behavior. I remember signing paperwork, so someone must have given it to me. I honestly have a hard time remembering any of the staff I met that first evening. I have a hard time remembering anything but the lead weight in my stomach, the shocks of fear in my fingertips. The teenage boy who traveled with me must have been low risk because I was taken through the door with a little barred window alone. Remember the scene in Willy Wonka where the hallway narrows and narrows until it ends in a tiny door? I know now what it felt like for those kids to walk through it. The whole high-risk ward was just a lounge and a short hallway, maybe 4 or 6 bedrooms. It felt a lot smaller than it looked. It felt like every wall was pressing directly into my skin. Those vague hospital workers took the book I brought with me and my wallet and my cigarettes. They made me hand over the drawstring from my pajama pants, so I had to hold them up with one hand as I paced around. I know the connotations of the word pace. I know that's what crazy people do, but anyone would pace here. There was no other way to move. As they led me to my high-risk bedroom, my mind became stuck on a single thought. I'm being punished. I was at a loss as to what I had done wrong. I was too sad. I asked for help incorrectly. My new roommate was crying. She was late for her Depo-Provera shot, and there was no doctor to give it to her because it was a Saturday. I knew she felt it too, that bewilderment. Why were we being punished? It was about bedtime by the time I was settled in. I don't think I slept at all that night. There was too much activity, nurses walking the halls and peeking in our room. If you ever spent a night in the hospital, you know the way they leave the lights on, the way things never settle down. No one sleeps. No one rests. I watched headlights slide over the ceiling. It was already shocking to think about people outside the hospital, driving their cars and walking in and out of any door they wanted. The next day brought a kind of boredom I had never known before, so much deeper and drier than your average Saturday afternoon with nothing to do. We couldn't have pens or pencils or crayons. The television was up near the ceiling, so we couldn't break it or change the channel. It was playing bad movies all day. I mean, truly atrocious things with talking chihuahuas. They let me have my book back. Some nice nonfiction about anthropology, but I couldn't focus. My current circumstances kept seeping in around the edges, making it impossible to think about anything else. To this day, I haven't finished that book, never picked it up again. There was some small talk, nothing too different from what you would hear riding the bus. One man began chattering semi-coherently with me about his time in the Army. He told me that they gassed him in basic training, which I assume was part of the delusional disorder he seemed to suffer from. Years later, I discovered that the Army really does expose new recruits to tear gas as part of their training, which I guess goes to show that even being mentally ill won't always stop you from dismissing everything another mentally ill person says. Later that afternoon, I was sitting at the table in the lounge doing nothing when someone came through the door with a little barred window and called my name. A bed had opened up in the low-risk ward, and someone had apparently decided that I was qualified to fill it. My life, such as it had become, was about to change dramatically. I was only being moved a few feet away to a room on the other side of a door, so it's hard to explain what a difference that made. The patients in the low-risk ward were generally depressed or alcoholic rather than delusional or manic. They were a more normal crowd, and I hate to admit this, but I felt so much more comfortable around them. They were easier to talk to, but beyond that, they were the kind of crazy that I felt I could safely identify with. Ending stigma should be all about solidarity, but there's a kind of hierarchy in mental hospitals, and the people who could pass for sane in the outside world like to stick together. This is a bit of a tangent, however. The other patients were a mere perk of being moved to low-risk territory. The most important benefit came from the ward itself. It was a bigger space, an L shape, with a dining room leading to a row of bedrooms that ended with a lounge. We still couldn't have pens, but there were boxes of crayons and kindergarten-style giant pencils. There were black and white pictures of fairies for us to color in. I was past the point of even objecting to being treated like a 6-year-old. I was just thrilled to have something to do, especially something so pleasantly mindless. Engaging enough, but without the risk of provoking any feelings or any profound thoughts. I changed out of my pajamas for the first time in 3 days, placed them in the laundry pile, and put on a hospital gown. I hadn't even noticed how gross my clothes had become until I was finally wearing something clean. It wasn't embarrassing to stroll down the hall in the paper-thin garment. A few other people were wearing them too, along with those old people socks with the sticky bottoms, so you don't slip and fall. One of the nicer things about being in a hospital is that you truly don't have to give a damn. I wandered into the lounge, which had a big TV and a remote control that we were actually allowed to pick up and use. It was turned on to one of those movie channels. Pineapple Express was playing. I sat on the couch and pulled a blanket over my bare legs. A few other people were in the room, laughing at the exploits of these goofy potheads. I think it was the fact that the plot required no effort to follow that did the trick. Nothing was seeping in at the edges. For the first time in a long time, I felt drawn in by something other than the shit in my head. At that moment, I felt like the layers of the ocean, a thick sediment of dread and claustrophobia, miles of sorrow, and at the very top, an agonizingly thin light. It wasn't exactly hope, but at least I was laughing. At least I was wearing clean clothes and could write a journal entry with a crayon if I felt like it. Being slightly less terrified can feel like bravery when that's the best you can manage. There are a lot of stories I could tell you about the psych ward or the days that led up to my going there. This is the one I prefer. The time that Pineapple Express saved my sanity. Now, if I could have chosen the movie that would change my life, I might have gone for something a little more poetic or profound, something that makes you sound smart when you casually mention you've seen it 1,000 times. But we're rarely able to choose the agents of our salvation. We get what we get. This is me in my hospital gown. This is me snorting at some mostly witty dialogue. This is me clutching my little wire, hoping someone else out there can feel it.